Not the Grammys, not the Oscars. How ARMY proved Jungkook never needed a stage to dominate the WO. If the biggest moment in global entertainment history didn't happen on a red carpet, didn't require a billion-dollar broadcast deal, and didn't involve a single gold statue being handed out on live television? What if it happened quietly, casually, with nothing more than a phone, dim lighting, and one artist speaking directly to the people who chose to stay? This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is exactly what happened when Jungkook went live and rewrote the rules of global influence without asking permission from the Grammys, the Oscars, or any traditional institution that once defined success. 1 year later, the numbers remain almost unbelievable. On December 18, 2024, Jungkook's relaxed, unannounced live stream pulled in more than 20.2 million viewers worldwide. No elaborate set, no orchestra, no presenters, no countdown clock. Just Jungkook, speaking, singing, laughing, and existing in real time with his fans. And yet, that single moment surpassed the viewership of some of the most prestigious award shows on Earth, including the Grammy Awards, the Academy Awards, the Golden Globe Awards, and the MTV Video Music Awards. This was not a coincidence. And it was not luck. When music media account at About Music YT resurfaced the moment on December 18, 2025, with a simple statement, 1 year ago today, Jungkook went live and drew over 20.2 million viewers, surpassing many awards shows. The internet didn't just react. It erupted. The posts spread rapidly across X, gathering tens of thousands of interactions in hours, reigniting a conversation that traditional media had quietly avoided. Why did a single artist, sitting casually in front of a phone, command more attention than institutions built over decades with billion-dollar budgets? The answer unsettled many people in the industry because it exposed a truth they were not ready to admit. Television no longer decides relevance. Institutions no longer grant legitimacy. Emotional connection does. Jungkook's live stream happened during a sensitive moment for BTS and their global fandom, ARMY. With the group on hiatus due to South Korea's mandatory military service, silence had become the norm. There were no group promotions, no synchronized releases, no world tours shaking stadiums. Yet instead of diminishing interest, the absence amplified longing. When Jungkook appeared live, he wasn't filling airtime. He was filling an emotional void. He spoke openly. He sang without pressure. He interacted without filters. There was no script designed to impress critics or voters. That authenticity became the production value. And in an era where audiences are exhausted by spectacle, authenticity became the most powerful currency of all. Many fans described the live stream not as content, but as comfort. Some called it healing. Others called it historic. And when comparisons emerged showing that Jungkook's single live surpassed the viewership of globally televised award shows, the reaction wasn't defensive. It was unapologetic. One viral reply read, "Jungkook Live is bigger than Grammys." Another dismissed attempts to downplay his influence by calling out how irrelevant cancellation narratives looked in the face of raw numbers and loyalty. This wasn't arrogance. It was data. For decades, award shows like the Grammys and Oscars functioned as cultural gatekeepers. Appearances equaled prestige. Wins equaled validation. Artists were expected to chase these stages as proof of their worth. But Jungkook did something radical without ever announcing it. He opted out of the chase. And in doing so, he revealed that the chase itself might be outdated. The live stream had no advertisements, no commercial interruptions, no sponsors fighting for screen time. And yet, millions chose to stay, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. That distinction matters. In traditional broadcasting, viewers are measured through systems that include passive consumption. In Jungkook's live, every viewer was active. They clicked. They waited. They stayed. They engaged. That level of voluntary attention is something traditional television has been losing for years. Industry analysts quietly noted the implications. If a single artist can outperform award shows without marketing, what does that say about the relevance of those institutions? If emotional loyalty outweighs institutional approval, what exactly are awards validating anymore? This is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for traditional media, because Jungkook didn't just outperform award shows. He exposed the shifting power structure of entertainment. Influence no longer flows top-down, from institutions to audiences. It flows horizontally, from artist to fan, directly and without intermediaries. Platforms like Weverse and Instagram Live have turned artists into their own broadcasters, their own networks, their own headline acts, and Jungkook mastered that space without trying to dominate it. The moment also recontextualized his solo career. Following the massive success of his album Golden, Jungkook had already proven his commercial strength. Chart records, streaming milestones, and global recognition had cemented his position. But the live stream showed something charts couldn't fully capture: emotional gravity. Numbers tell you how many people listened. That live told you how many people cared. For ARMY, the anniversary wasn't just about bragging rights. It was a reminder of why their bond with BTS feels different. This wasn't fandom fueled by marketing cycles or award seasons. It was built through years of direct communication, vulnerability, and shared growth. Jungkook's Live was simply the purest distillation of that relationship. As traditional award shows continue to struggle with declining viewership, shortened broadcasts, and questions about relevance, moments like this force a reckoning. What happens when the audience no longer waits for permission to decide what matters? What happens when artists stop needing stages to prove their dominance? Jungkook didn't reject the Grammys. He didn't criticize the Oscars. He didn't make a speech about institutions being obsolete. He simply went live. And the world showed up 1 year later. The message is impossible to ignore. Influence today is not about trophies. It's about trust. It's about presence. It's about making millions of people feel seen without ever asking them to clap on cue. And perhaps that is the most disruptive truth of all. The silence that followed that live stream was just as loud as the moment itself. There was no press conference the next morning, no official recap released by a network, no panel discussion dissecting the performance. And yet the industry felt it. Because when something that powerful happens without validation, without framing, without institutional approval, it forces a question no one wants to answer out loud. Who is really in control now? For years, traditional entertainment relied on the idea that prestige had to be granted. An artist stood on a stage only after being invited. Recognition was filtered through committees, voters, and carefully protected systems that decided who mattered and when. But that December night shattered that illusion. Millions did not wait for a broadcast schedule. They did not need subtitles, translations, or context. They came because they already knew who he was and what he meant to them. This is where many critics made a crucial mistake. They tried to measure the moment using old metrics. They compared it to ratings, to Nielsen numbers, to fragmented streaming data, as if those systems were still capable of explaining cultural dominance. They weren't, because what happened was not just viewership. It was collective attention, synchronized across time zones, languages, and cultures, with no external push. The fact that it happened during a period of group hiatus only intensified its meaning. Absence usually weakens momentum. In this case, it sharpened it. The live stream became a point of emotional convergence, a reminder that connection does not disappear just because promotion stops. In fact, it often grows stronger. Many in the industry quietly labeled the moment dangerous, not because it broke rules, but because it proved those rules were optional. If an artist can reach more people than a globally televised ceremony without stepping onto a stage, what leverage do those ceremonies still have? What bargaining power remains when attention can be summoned, not purchased? Fans understood this instinctively. That's why the anniversary reignited such intense reactions online. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about validation of something they had been saying for years, that emotional influence is not secondary to institutional recognition, it is superior to it. Awards can confirm success, but they can't manufacture loyalty. The language used by fans during the anniversary was telling. Words like proof, evidence, and receipt dominated the conversation. This wasn't blind devotion. It was data-backed confidence. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the reaction. The engagement on that anniversary post alone showed how deeply the moment was etched into collective memory. What made the live stream even more disruptive was its tone. There was no attempt to perform greatness. No speech about legacy.
No subtle campaigning.
Just presence. In a media landscape obsessed with scale, Jungkook chose intimacy, and intimacy scaled itself. This challenges one of the entertainment industry's longest-held assumptions, that bigger production equals bigger impact. The Live proved the opposite. Impact comes from resonance, not volume. From sincerity, not spectacle. As more artists observe this shift, the implications become impossible to ignore. Digital platforms are no longer just promotional tools. They are primary stages. Fans are no longer passive audiences. They are active participants. And institutions that fail to adapt risk becoming ceremonial rather than essential. For Jungkook, none of this required declaration. He didn't announce a revolution. He didn't frame himself as an industry disruptor. That is precisely why the moment carried so much weight. It wasn't forced. It wasn't strategic in the traditional sense. It was natural, and therefore unstoppable. 1 year later, the question is no longer whether this moment mattered. The question is how many similar moments are already reshaping the industry without permission, without trophies, without stages. Because once audiences realize they hold the power to decide what matters, they rarely give it back. And perhaps that is the real legacy of that live stream. Not the number, not the comparison, but the quiet realization that dominance no longer needs a spotlight to exist. What unsettled industry insiders most was not just the scale of that moment, but how calmly it happened. There was no buildup engineered by a public relations machine, no countdown designed to inflate anticipation. The Live began the way a conversation begins, naturally and without ceremony, and yet it reached farther than any stage meticulously constructed to manufacture awe. That contrast became impossible to ignore. For decades, the entertainment world insisted that grandeur was necessary to command attention. That night suggested the opposite, that authenticity, when trusted, travels faster than spectacle ever could. The aftermath revealed something even more telling. While award shows scrambled to analyze declining ratings and younger audiences drifting away, fans were not debating whether Jungkook's Live should be considered important. They already knew it was. The discussion instead focused on what this meant for the future. If one artist could generate more global attention with sincerity than institutions could with decades of history, then perhaps the hierarchy itself was shifting. Traditional media attempted to downplay the comparison by arguing context. Award shows, they said, serve different purposes. They celebrate industries. They honor peers. They preserve tradition. All of that may be true, but it missed the point. The comparison was never about function. It was about relevance. And relevance is determined not by intention, but by where people choose to spend their time. That choice is what made the moment historic. Millions chose Jungkook over everything else available to them at that hour. They chose connection over curation, presence over production. In doing so, they sent a message that could not be edited or reframed. The center of gravity in entertainment has moved. This shift is not isolated. It reflects a broader cultural transformation accelerated by digital platforms, where audiences no longer wait for permission to participate. They engage directly, emotionally, and immediately. Jungkook's live stream became a symbol of that transformation not because it was planned to be, but because it embodied it so completely. The emotional undertone of the broadcast mattered as much as the numbers. This was not a performance designed to impress strangers. It was a moment shared with people who already understood him. That familiarity created a sense of safety, a space where vulnerability felt natural rather than strategic. And in an age where audiences are increasingly skeptical of polished narratives, that vulnerability carried extraordinary power. As the anniversary circulated online, many fans reflected on where they were when they first watched it. Different countries, different time zones, different lives. Yet the memory felt collective. That shared recollection is something award shows struggle to achieve today. Their moments are fragmented, clipped, consumed in highlights rather than lived in real time. Jungkook's Live was lived. That distinction matters more than any trophy ever could. The industry will continue to debate whether such moments threaten traditional structures or simply coexist with them. But the audience has already answered in its own way. Attention is no longer something that can be commanded through prestige alone. It must be earned through trust, consistency, and emotional honesty. Jungkook did not set out to make a statement that night.